Hi there, good afternoon, and welcome to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show. This is a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So this is my Monday night show, which I do every Monday, of course, called Look Back at a Classic Rock Album. Today we're going to be doing this album. KILH Destroyer. I think maybe over here might be a little bit better to see. Okay, no, maybe not. It's hard to tell. Yeah, anyways, I can never quite figure out where's the best spot here. Okay, there, I think that's not too bad. So there you have it, KILH Destroyer, with the original cover released from 1976. So a little bit about this album. Released March the 15th, 1976. Studio was recorded at Electric Lady and the Record Plant in New York City. It's about 34 minutes, maybe 34 and a half minutes long, which is perfect length. On the Casablanca label, I think this actually is on the Casablanca label. Yes, it is. That's true, it is. And produced, of course, by none other than Bob Ezrin. Yeah. So this was KISS's fourth studio album, and their first really big breakthrough as far as their studio albums go. Like they were on the map with a KISS Alive, and this was very different from their original three releases, which were more raw in nature. This was much better production, much better sound to it. The artwork here done by Ken Kelly. You'll also see that artwork on albums such as this one, Rainbow Rising, and again on KISS's Love Gun, and on some Man of War albums as well. But this was the I think these two albums came out the same year. I'm not sure which one he produced first, which cover he produced first, but I'm going to say it was probably this one. It's probably his first one. So this album has a lot of KISS classics, a lot of staples that they use in their concerts. Has that logo and the pictures of the four members of KISS standing on a pile of rubble here and a destroyed city behind them. And it's actually the back part also shows some more fire and the city being destroyed. Inside cover, if you're curious about this, picture of the KISS Army, which was a big thing when I was growing up. There it is. Shout it out loud on the KISS Army. Yeah, so this particular CD that I'm holding here, or that I own here, is probably one of my first owned CDs. I don't know exactly which CD I owned first. I know the first album or LP I ever owned was KISS Alive, but this was among the first CD issues that I had, and so I've had this probably since late 80s. So what's that, 35 years I've had this album. Still in good shape though. So is the Love Gun, which came not too long after, at least not in time. This was released in 77, but when I purchased Destroyer, I think I got Love Gun and Rock and Roll Over at the same time, which at that time were my three favorite KISS albums. When this album came out in March of 76, I asked for it for Christmas of 76. I didn't get it. I got the Boston album instead. And we know that story. I'm not going to go into it. But anyways, eventually I did get this album. I'm not even sure when. It might have been in early 77. And shortly after I got Rock and Roll Over. And then that same year I got Love Gun. So I had all three of them in that same year as LPs. Actually, I never had Love Gun as an LP. I did have the other two, though, as LPs. And then I got Love Gun for the first time as a CD. For some reason, I never got it. It's the same as Dress to Kill. The two of them I never got. It's funny, the third and the sixth one, the first three set, then you had the Destroyer, and then the second three set you had Love Gun, and I, for some reason, didn't get them. I consider them the weaker two of albums of those sets as well. Anyways, this album, when I got it, immediately became my favorite album, and I think it remained that way till sometime either in the early 80s or the late 70s, when I started to become more enamored with other bands. But for at least the first 3 or 4 years, I'm pretty sure this was my favorite album. Kiss Alive eventually passed it, and I liked Kiss Alive a lot, but this was something new and different and more better production and everything, so I got right into it. So featured on here, before I get going too far into it, of course, is the classic Kiss rock band, the classic Kiss lineup, which included Peter Criss on drums and vocals, Paul Stanley on rhythm guitar and vocals, Gene Simmons on bass and vocals, and Ace Frehley on lead guitar and backing vocals, because at that point in time Ace wasn't singing. This is also the first album that featured other musicians other than the original four playing certain parts. Wagner played some of the guitar parts for Frehley when he didn't show to the studio. They got him to play those parts. He played the acoustic part on Great Expectations and Beth as well. Okay, so the tracks on this album I'm really very familiar with. I've probably, and I'm saying conservatively, I've probably listened to this album 1,000 times easily. Not so much in recent years. It's not one of the Kiss albums I go to when when I'm in the mood for Kiss. I usually either go to a live Ace Frehley solo album, those two for sure. Sometimes I go to Hotter Than Hell or the original Kiss debut album, or sometimes I may even actually play Dynasty. But I don't for some reason go to Destroyer, and I think it's because I played it so much and it was on the radio so much and it's on everything that Kiss does. They play the songs from this album that I just tired of it. That's all it is. It's just a burnout thing. Probably one of the most burned out albums I've ever owned. So, Detroit Rock City, and Shout It Out Loud and Beth. I don't need to hear those songs ever again. Well, maybe Beth. I would listen to Beth because my first girlfriend's name was Beth, and this was the song that I liked because of that. You know, it's a coincidence, nothing more. But Shout It Out Loud and Detroit Rock City, I never need to hear those two songs ever again. Great songs, don't get me wrong. I think they're party anthem songs. I think with Shout Out Loud, especially, Kiss was trying to hit another rock and roll all night, party every day kind of thing going on there. Very similar songs. Detroit Rock City is, of course, long been one of their staple opening songs. It used to be Deuce, and then they moved to Detroit Rock City. Sometimes they use both. But, yeah, just never need to hear either of them again. King of the Nighttime World kind of falls in there a bit because it's the tune that follows Detroit Rock City, so a lot of the times I listen to it as well. It's not as burned out because it doesn't get the radio play that the others does, but it still gets a little bit of too much of it. God of Thunder was one of my favorite tracks on the album for many years. I don't listen to it that much anymore. It's not a song I go to very much. Great Expectations. This is a kind of a funny song. I both hated it when I first heard it and then liked it, and now I don't care for it anymore. It's a weird tune. It just doesn't really make, it's just Gene's ego, right? What are you going to say? The flip side I like much better. Flaming Youth, Sweet Pain, two of my favorite deep cuts from Kiss, any Kiss album. Flaming Youth may be my favorite on this album. Ace Frehley wrote it, but it's sang by Paul Stanley. But this is one of the first tracks where they actually use a bit of a keyboard part on it, and I really think it sounds great on this album. Sweet Pain, another heavy Gene Simmons pen song. with the guitar solo, I believe, was done by Wagner as well. Then you have the last song on this album, which I think is probably one of the best deep cuts on any album by Kiss, and that's Do You Love Me. Fantastic tune. I think Paul does a fantastic job on the vocals on this song, as he does on most of the early Kiss stuff. And I just think it's a great tune. I love the drum part at the beginning, the heaviness of the drum part. It wasn't something you heard too much in that day and age. Heavy drum part at the beginning of a song, that became something more stable in the early 80s with the Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel stuff and all that. But yeah, fantastic drum part. So the album itself, of course, has to be considered a classic album, because I think this is kind of the album that put Kiss on the map. Yes, Kiss Alive is a fantastic album, maybe their best album, but this is the one I believe put them on the map. Not one of my favorites anymore, but not because the album, I think the album was overrated or anything. I just think that it's been grossly overplayed and has just left me tired of listening to it. I get that same feeling a little bit with Rock and Roll Over, but Rock and Roll Over for some reason doesn't get quite the radio play. I think it's a harder, more rocking album than Destroyer, but it doesn't get quite the radio play that Destroyer got. So anyways, there you have it. Kiss Destroyer from 1976. They're one of, I think many people consider it their seminal album, at least seminal studio album for sure, and one of their classic rock albums of all time. So I hope you enjoyed the video today. Please like and subscribe, and we'll be back next Monday with another classic rock album. So take care. Bye.